Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us here today. I am Ruxana at the Center of Learning and Teaching, and Suleiman is the host of the Zoom meeting. I'll give it over to Suleiman first to clarify a few netiquette for all of us, but I think by now we are pretty well versed with it. So just a quick round, Suleiman.
Hello, everyone. A few things to mention before we properly start this session. First, that we are recording it. Then, if anyone of you has an internet connection that is not that much good, then please keep your video turned off. Unmute yourself only if there is a question to ask, but during the Q&A session. And do leave your comments and questions in the chat box. We will answer your questions. The last thing, Dr. Hoda wants all the participants to mention their names and disciplines in the chat. So please do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Suleiman. And very quickly again to run through how we conduct these webinars with you. We usually have a speaker first with their expose, one or if there are more, and then we go on to question and answer. Because of the topic today and the interest that you had shown in assessments, we have a feeling that this session is going to extend beyond the perhaps 30-minute webinar that we had planned. And that doesn't mean you are most welcome to leave if you have prior engagements, but I have a feeling, like always, you'll be staying on. Very quickly on to the topic today, it's alternate assessments. And you well know that as we shift to quickly shifted to remote instruction, we will all taken aback with the load of the work and learning on our own. And most of you have done a marvelous job of learning on your own and finding out strategies that work with you. Our webinars of best practice show that amply, and your comments show that amply. But assessments is an area that you have continuously asked for, and there's a lot of jargon that needs to be unpacked. You talk about assessment, formative assessment, you talk about evaluations, and then you say what's the difference between evaluation and assessment. And now there's the synchronous and asynchronous mode of assessments, and they are sort of creating a lot of confusion as to how to ensure that they are fair, transparent, there's no plagiarism, there's no cheating, and that's a very tough job. I'm cutting, to the point and want to introduce a superb expert. I met her ages ago at an international conference, and I've been extremely impressed with her expertise. She's a no-nonsense person up front. That's what I loved about her. She cuts down to the points, to the pithy points, and that's her work. She is actually a medical doctor. I was very surprised to know, but she joined American University of Cairo in 2007 as a faculty member, and she has been teaching extensively over there. And over the years, she has now grown and become the director of the Center of Learning and Teaching at the campus. And I must say, Hoda, that I'm extremely jealous of your center, because you, I think, have over 12, 14 or how many staff, and they're all extremely competent with a few PhDs as well. I think there are quite a few PhDs among you in the CLT Center. And you handhold. Yes, you individually handhold faculty, and at the same time, you work with students on the change strategies that you bring about in professional development. And that's a remarkable model. And I dream and hope one day that at FCC, we are able to follow that model. For me, it's just one single person. And I'm especially thankful for your resources that I have used for my site, and for your help whenever I've asked for it to talk to our faculty. And so over to you without much ado. Hoda, all yours.
Thank you, Roxana. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, and it's my second time actually joining you for a webinar. Well, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how to assess student learning in an online environment. And again, it's very challenging for all of us. We've been thrown into the situation, the global community of faculty across the globe, to be asked to teach remotely, and not only that, to assess our students remotely. So as part of our efforts at CLT, we put together a lot of resources. And it varies by discipline. So we've noticed that some faculty adapted very quickly to assessment online. And because of that, I thought of looking at, what your disciplines were. So in the poll in the chat, I can see that a lot of you are from physics, mathematics, chemistry, but also from the more humanities, like economics, social sciences, psychology. So we have a wide variety of people in the audience today, and it will differ. So a lot of the examples I see in the audience, and a lot of the experiences differ greatly depending on what you teach. And this is something we had to respect when we were consulting with our faculty, because there is a lot of disciplinary constraint around how you assess online, and you'll see when we talk about some of the examples. So when we say assessment or exam or proctoring or monitoring, some of these terms or this jargon that I'll use in this presentation, we want to agree on what I mean by that. So an assessment is basically any type of method in which you assess student learning. So it can be a formative assessment or it can be a summative assessment. We're going to focus mainly today on summative assessments, which is basically an exam type or a final type of assessment at the end of the semester or at the end of a module or an end of an experience. Monitoring and proctoring is something that was a huge issue for our faculty personally, because a lot of our courses are designed to be assessed in a classroom environment where the student is actually being monitored or proctored while they're doing that. So that was a challenge. So some of the strategies in this presentation refer to the word proctored or monitored, just so that we get the language clear. So before we start, when you're looking at assessment in general, you have to kind of think, do you want to replace what you would have done in a regular classroom with a traditional non-exam option, or do you want to redesign your traditional exam for online delivery or submission? So are you replacing what you have with something different, or are you redesigning what you have so that you can actually deliver it online? So this is the core question. And of course, the crux of the matter here is that whatever you do, whatever you decide to do, you must remember your learning outcomes. So a lot of our faculty struggled with, I had 3 midterms and a final. I have to do 3 midterms and a final. That's not necessarily the case. So if you end up teaching in the fall or in the summer online, I would recommend that you rethink assessment by learning outcomes and not the number of assessments that you do. So even if you end up doing 1 midterm and a final, but you achieve assessment of your learning outcomes, that might be more valid and important than the number of assessments that you do. As long as you are achieving assessment of all your learning outcomes in a valid way, this is the most important thing. Another thing to consider when you look at assessment in the online environment is the philosophy of academic integrity in these online environments. I've put in this presentation a link to an article that discusses the 3 levels of how you can think differently about academic integrity. And of course, in a longer time frame, we could discuss this at length. But it boils down to 3 things. The first level is this level of trust we have with our students. So you can basically have a candid conversation with your students and say, I'm going to give you an open book exam, but I trust you not to collaborate together on this open book exam, versus a level of verification. I can run an exam in which I require you to verify your identity online by turning on a Zoom camera, for example, showing your ID and doing the exam while Zoom is turned on. Or I can use an online proctoring software that the university pays a lot of money for and observe you while you're taking the exam. So these are the kinds of philosophies towards academic integrity that a lot of universities are looking at. And as you can see, they're very different philosophies. And they require very different resources. And the conversation, if you're monitoring, there was a recent article in Inside Higher Ed a few days ago talking about the huge controversy around online proctoring and online monitoring of students and student privacy, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to carefully consider when you are assessing students online, the design of your online assessments versus the delivery of your online assessments. And this is something maybe we can discuss at some point after the presentation. All right, so here's a quick overview of what the types of assessments that you can provide online. So you can do an open book exam in which you replace a traditional proctored exam. So you would usually have run an exam in a classroom where you were there with your TA, you were watching your students taking the exam. You decide to replace it with an open book exam. You could give them a paper or a project or a case study, you could have them create a video, or you could run an oral exam. I don't know how frequently your students take oral exams, but for example, in my college education, I frequently took oral exams. Our students never take oral exams, so it would depend on the culture. But again, oral exams are a valid way of assessment. And then you have performance-based and creative work. So you could easily think of replacing a traditional exam that would have been run in a classroom with any of these options. And we'll talk a little bit about what these are. And then you could deliver a traditional exam that would have been run in a classroom online, either a multiple choice, a typed written exam, or a handwritten exam, but deliver it online. And there are ways in which you can do that. So open book exams can be done, you can deliver the exam through your Moodle platform, send the students the questions, give them a time frame, and have them submit it online, whether through a Turnitin, for example, so you can check for plagiarism, or any other tool that you use in your institution. You can have them submit a paper, a project, or a case study. And again, if you have your Moodle platform, you can deliver the exam to your students. You set a specific time frame, and you can use any kind of platform to deliver it to your students. So as long as you have the tech infrastructure to do so, even if you have email, you can still deliver an online assessment to your students. Oral exams can be done through Zoom. You have your Zoom platform. You can schedule sessions for students and have a 10, 20, 30-minute slot per student and run your oral exams. You would have to design some kind of assessment rubric so that students were treated fairly during the oral exams. And I'll share an excellent resource for oral exams later on in the presentation. Performance-based, again, you can do that and deliver a performance-based or creative work exam over Zoom or Google Meet. You can have your students upload record their performances using, upload them to YouTube and have them share a private link with you so you can grade it. There are all sorts of free production tools that our students have access to. So these are the kinds of things you can do to replace an exam. It does require a lot of effort on the part of the faculty to kind of rethink and replace a traditional assessment. But this is where the creativity of the faculty member does come in, and where the authenticity of the assessment comes into play. At the end of the day, it is a design question, and the purpose or the uniqueness of the student's works comes into play. It's very difficult to plagiarize these types of assessments. The more traditional is, for example, using Moodle Quiz, Moodle Test Tool. You can create Blackboard tests. You can upload test banks. You can create short tests that are very tightly timed and quizzes for multiple tests. You can create multiple versions of tests so that students really can have, each can be delivered a separate version of the test so that it's very difficult for them to cheat from each other. If you have access to what they call monitoring software, such as Respondus or others, you can actually have students use these software so that it locks down their browser and they sort of can't cheat during the exam. We actually tested out this software this semester. There's a lot of controversy around these monitoring softwares, as I mentioned, but you can run a Blackboard test online or a Moodle test online without any kind of monitoring and still get some good results without a lot of cheating. You can still design it. It does take a lot of effort, but it's completely doable. You can have students submit typed written exams also on your Moodle test tool function. And you can even have students do handwritten exams in which they write in their answers in a timed exam. They get the questions, they write in their answers, and they just take a picture on their phone and submit it either by email or through Moodle. A lot of our faculty did a very simple approach. They sent them the questions, they asked them to handwrite the answers so they knew it was their own work, and told them just to submit their responses. So these are a couple of examples. Again, the slides will be available to you. You'll have time to look at them at ease. This is kind of a quick summary of some of the ideas that were presented, the pros and the cons. Alternative assessments are my personal favorite, but again, in some disciplines, especially in the sciences, chemistry, biology, physics, some of the foundational courses in psychology and economics, and I can see many of you are from those disciplines, our faculty really struggled to come up with alternative assessments, especially in those courses where the students are still getting the foundational knowledge and they cannot really, they don't have the skills to do the higher level thinking and the application in complex case studies and open book exams and the synthesis types of questions. That being said, a lot of our faculty were able to come up with creative solutions through alternative assessments, find case study-like questions, create multiple versions of exams. They were able to do that, but it does require, it is a challenge. And that is why they resorted to the Moodle or the Blackboard test tool for multiple choice questions. Okay, so I'm going to run through these quickly. Some of the options here, I'm going to just minimize the gallery view so that I can look at the challenges here. When you have regular online exams that you run, say, on a Blackboard test tool, or in your case, Moodle, internet connectivity is going to be an issue. So if you decide to run a quiz on Moodle, and I'm assuming that many of you may be considering that, you may want to consider internet connectivity. You may want to consider that, you know, high bandwidth and surveillance technologies, if you choose to use a Respondus software, for example, that might be a problem. And that if you give a very small time window for the student, like 20 minutes or half an hour for a student to do an exam, if they don't have a high-speed device, that might be a disadvantage to them. If you do want to consider alternative exam assessments and you're not going to go for timed quizzes on Moodle tools, then you might want to consider open book exams. We've had a lot of success with open book exams. They do require you to create the types of questions, taking these things into considerations. Your students will be allowed to review all kinds of reference material during the exam, so the types of questions you can ask need to be thoughtfully considered. The exam questions can even be sent to students ahead of something you may want to consider or you may not. The students are all home because this is the way we are now, but in the end of the day, they have a specified time period. So 24 hours or 48 hours, depending on the complexity of the questions. So let's say in an upper level course where they're senior students and you're giving them, you know, a complex synthesis type of a set of questions, they may get 48 hours to answer the question. You would give them specific instructions on what kinds of resources they can use. And again, the open book exam, you would ensure that no two students will come up with the same type of answer. There are a lot of advantages for open book exams. The types of questions are questions that cannot be answered with memorization. It supports the types of higher thinking skills that we really want our students to be using. Students are learning a lot of things that they wouldn't learn in the more conventional types of exams that we've been using historically in a lot of our courses. A lot of these new approaches to alternative assessments have been strongly encouraged in a lot of universities around the globe. So I've looked at a lot of the strategies for assessment in US universities, and they have been pushing alternative assessments, as has AC. There are some challenges. If students have never taken an open book exam, you really do have to provide a lot of guidance. You may also want to help students prepare reference material. So if a student is not really that equipped to prepare the material ahead of time, it may be a disadvantage to them. A student who goes into an open book exam thinking they're just going to use the textbook will not do well on an open book exam, and it is a lot of workload. These exams are difficult to design, as are the rubrics. There's a couple of references in every single slide. These references are superb. I would recommend that you take a look at them, and most of this material is from these references. There's a lot of advice here also for how to overcome dishonesty. In an open book exam, the main problem here would be that they may copy and paste from resources. They may have someone else do the for them. They may outsource this to a paper mill of sorts. So some faculty have suggested adding an oral defense to an open book exam where you ask your students over Zoom in 5 or 10 minutes to defend their paper or their exam. This is okay if you have a small class, but if you have a very large class, this would be difficult. Another option is to have them submit it handwritten versus typed. So these are some tips for how to do that. Another option, I'm going to skip through these. Another option is to do performance-based assignments. I've had a lot of success in my courses in having students produce things like digital narratives, videos, projects, presentations, performances, artistic things. I teach a science literacy course. Especially in the world we live in now, you could find a lot of topics. If you teach psychology, economics, even chemistry, even physics, you could find a lot of topics in which you could have students produce part of their final submission in a video format and get creative. A lot of the problem questions can be taken, can be given as a take-home section. So part of it can be as a performance-based and part of it can be as a written. So you can merge two formats. This would require more work from the students, but again, if you don't have multiple midterms, if you haven't had time, you could put more weight on this final assessment. For numerical exams, things like economics, calculus, et cetera, a take-home exam may look like an assignment, and in these cases, you may want to create multiple versions of this exam and just change the inputs. We had one faculty member who, in a class, he had 60 students in 2 sections of 30 students each, and he created 30 versions of the exam so that every 2 students had one version across the sections to make sure that the students didn't cheat on a take-home exam. And he spent a lot of time preparing those exams, but he did it so that he wouldn't have to use monitoring software. So that's just an example of how much work it can take. And yes, it is a lot of work. I have to put that in as a disclaimer. Okay, I'm going to skip to these 2 resources here just because I'd like to show them to you very quickly, and then I'd like to stop for questions. This is a resource it's a very nice resource that covers oral exams. Here's an example of oral exams without preparation, with preparation, preparation with aids, student presentations, defense-based. This is a beautiful resource. The link is in the presentation. And it covers the types of oral exams that you can run. I'll give you some examples of what our faculty have done. They've had a lot of success with the short oral defense for all students in small classes. And some faculty have actually told students that after an open book exam, some students may be asked to defend their work as a deterrent to cheating. I have my own personal opinion of this. I don't think it's fair to pick out certain students that you suspect of cheating. I think that if there's going to be an oral defense, it should be for everyone. But if you have a very large class, you may consider this. Another approach for oral exams is to have group oral exams for group projects. So when you have group work, it's often useful to have a group oral exam in which the students would know that any one of the group members would be called upon for an oral exam. So these are the types of tips. Oral exams can be very powerful for small classes. I mean, I think they're a very good tip. The only concern here is if a student has never taken an oral before, it can be a huge source of anxiety for our students. I need to stop here for a moment and just highlight the fact that in this COVID semester, both students and faculty, but primarily students have a lot of anxiety around assessment. Students are being assessed in a very exceptional circumstance. And I think whenever possible, we should try and be as flexible as possible in our assessments. Alternative assessments allow a little bit for this flexibility. And this is why we were promoting them so strongly, because we felt that it does allow for the student to have that level of flexibility in presenting their work and showing their level of achieving the learning outcomes in the course. Another very good resource here is using portfolio-based assessment, in which you can ask students to put together a collection of artifacts for their learning. This resource has a lot of examples for e-portfolio-based learning in disciplines like geography, education, information technology. So these are a lot of examples here. So for example, if you're in, let's say, a psychology, the student has done 5 or 6 or 7 assessments throughout the semester. One of the final assessments could be for them to put together a learning portfolio that documents their learning throughout the course, ask them to reflect on how each of these assessments has contributed to their learning, and to create a final reflection through an e-portfolio. I've used e-portfolios in a creativity course that I taught for several semesters, and it was a superb way of having the students collect the entire semester's work in a what they call a signature piece at the end of the semester that counted towards 10 or 15% of their final grade, where they could reflect on their learning throughout the semester. There's a lot of work that's been done on e-portfolios through the American Academy of Colleges and Universities, in this being a high impact practice in signature work for learning. And I can also maybe at the end put that into the chat as well. And it's also considered an alternative assessment. So I'm going to stop here. I think we're about 30 minutes in. And end with this is that I think that what has worked most effectively, and Roxana said that, you know, our center is very effective, and I think we have done we've done a lot of work. But what has worked most effectively is how the faculty have worked together within the departments. We've had excellent feedback from our schools in how they have come together. They've shared resources and ideas. They've been very generous with sharing their resources with each other. Our final webinar of the semester was a series of 5 faculty who shared their success stories. Our final newsletter of the semester on our website was faculty success stories. We were hoping to do a faculty failures one, but we were concerned that faculty wouldn't want to share their failures when everything was just so raw at the end of the semester. But the sharing culture, I think, even on a very small scale, is very important. And finally, whatever content you develop today for your online course is an asset. In most cases, the Chronicle of Higher Education has a website where US colleges are declaring their plans for the fall. And even though most colleges are declaring their intent to return in the fall, it will not be business as usual. And there will be more online learning. There will be more blended learning. This is, I think, the writing's on the wall. Whatever online content you have, it will not be put to waste. You will be using it. It is an asset, and I would say it's well worth the effort for your students and for you as a reflective teacher to do this now and to enjoy it while you're doing it, because it is a learning experience for us all. And thank you. And I'm here for the next 30 minutes for your questions, as long as you need me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hoda. I knew you were not the expert for no reason on assessments. You have got such a thorough grasp on assessments. Just to let you know, like I said, what we are doing also is actually sharing of best practices through these webinars. And our faculty have been very, very creative and have done an amazing job. And like you, we are planning to put up actually by name a list of, the work done by them, by faculty name on our website once we are done with the transcribing these videos. But I see that there have been a lot of questions from the audience. Faculty,
Yes.
Suleiman, if you could please quickly start with some. I have not kept a tab on the chat. Hoda, I think you have seen quite a few.
Yes. From here and start with the first question from
Yes,
Mohammed
please.
Farouk
Yeah.
about internet connectivity. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Mohammed. The internet connectivity issue is a huge problem. Even as we speak, sometimes I have to turn off my video for many of my meetings, etc. The most important thing is flexibility and to plan for some asynchronous. If you're teaching, always plan for the asynchronous element. This webinar is recorded because if you can't make it, you can watch it later. The same thing for your teaching. Always make your material available to your students offline. This is the most important thing. The other thing is that if it's going to be a high stakes assessment that requires connectivity, that's why we love alternative assessments. Alternative assessments are flexible. Having a timed Blackboard Moodle quiz or a Moodle quiz that has 30 minutes where the student has to be logged in. If a student gets an internet cut, they get logged out of Moodle, they get logged in again, they lose the test, they feel they lose the grade, they are sending emails to you. It's very challenging. You have to have that backup plan. If a student says, I lost my internet, you have to be prepared to run the test again for them to be fair. That's my personal opinion. Some faculty will say, okay, I'm going to run 10 Blackboard quizzes and I'm only going to count 8 so that if you lose your internet twice, then you're safe. But some students have had really bad internet. So yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's a huge problem. The number 3 trend we've had in our feedback from students has been internet issues in Egypt.
Yeah.
So flexibility, Mohammed, I would say.
Yeah. Though that is the question I could see is the internet connectivity, and related to it was that students do not know full well how to use technology for their tasks. There's another question about languages. I think in the resources that you put up, there was an assessment by departments, but if you would like to elaborate a bit on that, Hoda. Rubab asked a question about how to assess languages. I think Rubab.
Yeah, there was a question I see about English language students.
Yes.
So we have our English language instruction unit, which has hundreds of students every year. These are intensive English language, and usually they meet every day for 3 hours face-to-face. These and they really struggle. My recommendation would be to talk to other faculty and see what they've done. Our ELI faculty have used a lot of collaborative platforms. So they've used Google Suite. I don't know if you have access to all the Google Suite platforms. So they've used Google Doc, Google Slides. They've used Google Sites. They've had students doing writing and at least the writing components collaboratively on those websites. I think the most challenging part has been the speaking components. And again, my expertise, my background is medicine and science, but from talking to ELI instructors, I think they benefited a lot from the community and by leveraging whoever is tech savvy by training and teaching each other. And by trying to leverage the types of technologies that are out there to help the students. There are a lot of free technologies that are very useful for language teaching that those of us in the sciences would never consider using because they're not helpful to us. There are also a couple of platforms, I think, for practice I can maybe put you in touch with a couple of ELI instructors at AUC if you're interested. Maybe they are be willing to share some technology resources.
I think that would be a great idea. I have another question about what is the best way to conduct MCQ-based quiz by Dr. Amar Jugtai from business. Is there a good way, you know?
For MCQ-based quizzes, what we have been advising is using for quiz and for Blackboard quiz, there's a way for you to randomize the questions so that each student gets a different version. I'm not an expert in how to do it, steps, but if you have a Moodle person in your unit, they will probably know how to do it. It randomizes a different version for every student. And then again, the student would have a short time to complete the quiz. The problem with that is if the internet cuts, then the student has to repeat the test. There's no sure way, of course, to prevent cheating on these kinds of tests, but you can create multiple versions so that if a student retakes the test, they get a different version. The other option is to upload a test bank. So to upload, to purchase or to create a test bank, a very large test bank, but that requires a license for, at least for Blackboard. I'm not sure for Moodle, but there are test banks for certain disciplines. So for example, if you're teaching from a certain textbook, sometimes there are online test banks for that particular textbook. It depends on what resources you have.
Yeah. I think we have a test bank facility in our Moodle interface, but I'm not sure if we have the licensed one, and that I will have to find out. Are there any more questions? I didn't see any more questions in the audience. I do see that. Suleiman?
There is a question from Dr. Abdul Jalil Khan. How to test whether student is able to do a mathematical or statistical numerical?
Okay.
That's an interesting question. We actually have a very creative calculus professor at AUC, and from day one, he was obsessed with how to teach Calculus 1 and Calculus 2 to 300, 400 students who have to take these courses. So what he was doing was he was creating Blackboard quiz question sets. And he was asking the students to actually answer the Blackboard quizzes, but to write their working out on a piece of paper. And so that he could see their working out. They could see the way they were solving it. And then to submit the quiz on Blackboard or Moodle, and then to take a photo of their working out and to email it to him or to the
Your
TA.
voice is breaking up, Hoda.
All right, sorry, I'll turn off my video. Is that a little bit better? Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, I don't know. It has been breaking up a bit off and on, but perhaps, yeah, let's see, because yeah.
Okay, so if this is better, I'll just repeat what I said.
Please do.
The calculus professor had to, he would send a Blackboard quiz to all his students, but he would ask them to take a blank piece of white paper and put their ID at the top of the paper and to do the working out handwritten and take a photo and send it to him by email.
Oh. So you were saying that he used the handwritten draft for checking the authenticity of the student, right?
And also to see that they actually understood that they could work it out step by step.
Okay, okay, that's it. So he didn't use technology for that. I see that Sabah Khalil wanted to say something. Sabah?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I mean, we have been talking about, assessing students over the internet, but there are some students who do not have the internet at all and would also like to assess them. Is there any way that you have devised to assess them?
The most basic way is Do they have access to email?
They don't have any access. They do not have internet, etc. So at the moment, I think SC College what's doing is they are sending them the hard copy of the assignments, etc. So they get it through the mail, the regular mail.
That's probably the only option. There was actually, I mean, if this persists, I visited a university in South Africa where their model was basically preloading laptops and iPads with all the material and loaning them to students, and having the students complete the work, and then delivering the iPad or the laptop in the midterm and the end of semester. But that's expensive because you have to purchase the devices.
Yeah, I think if we go into a longer session like this, Hoda, I've heard that there's a possibility we might be providing resources to students on similar lines, either as flash drives or either as preloaded computer. And I think that's a very good option. Do we see any more questions from our faculty? Or any sharing that you would like to do? You're most welcome to share what you've been doing in a similar manner, perhaps, and I'm sure most of you are. So please, if you'd like to share, please do.
I can see already, you know, some people have suggested having students record themselves explaining through video. So even so, one of the tools that students do like a lot, if you have teenagers, you probably know, is the social media, those voice notes, WhatsApp groups and things like that. So even recording a voice note of explaining to the professor, you know, first I did this and then I did this and then I did that. One feedback option for some faculty have actually created these social media groups pages for their students. It's a personal choice, but a lot of students really like having this space with their professors. But some professors don't like this option. They like to keep the distance between the professional and the student. But again, it's a personal thing. But those who have created WhatsApp groups and Facebook pages for their students have reported that it builds rapport, and that students are able to share their feedback very quickly and their ideas very quickly with their faculty. Especially, and you're able also to share very quickly their feedback. Within Blackboard and Moodle, there is also a feedback option, voice notes. You can grade assessments on Moodle and Blackboard through voice. You can give feedback through voice. That's also very interesting. Some faculty use it for language as well.
I know that lots of our faculty use that option of like having students record a 2-minute audio or something to respond to their queries. I also see that Elizabeth has written that she asks her students to take a photo of their assignments and their work done and send it to her. I think that's a great way of going about it. I do not see any more queries or suggestions. I do see something about HEC policy on assessments. That's right, Seemal. We're trying to get that done. There are thanks starting to come in for you, Hoda. And thanks. Great. I think there are no more. Suleiman, did you see any more that I might have missed?
And there
was
one question.
Google Classroom for language students. Yeah, a lot of people are reporting Google Classroom working really well. Google in general, Google Suite, their tools work really well together. For students in general, the rule of thumb is try and keep everything in one place, especially when they're under stress of doing all their courses online. So if you're on Moodle, maybe try and stay in Moodle, or at least link everything within Moodle. So if you're doing Google Docs, Google Slides, whatever, link it from Moodle, or just use Google Classroom. I wouldn't recommend using 2 platforms in the same course because it confuses students. If you can integrate Google Suite within Moodle, I don't know if Google is integrated into your Moodle platform or not, but Google is integrated into our Blackboard platform, and it's a huge success.
Yeah.
So the integration of technologies within one learning management system is the best way to go because the students feel that it's one environment and they're not confused and it's a one-stop shop.
You're right. We have got Google, I think, Drive into our integrated into our Moodle, and we also have a connector to Turnitin. So we are trying to put up as many platforms together on a Moodle. And I think after this experience and after the feedback and suggestions, our faculty have been very creative and they have tried other things. And we will be, polishing that, refining the system a bit more. I see that one of our faculty has sent you a shukran in Arabic.
Arabic, yes.
Thank you so much, Atiq. I know. And I'm truly indebted to you for finding time. I know you said when I asked you, you were busy with your own assessments and winding up of the session. Lucky for us, we are now to go into final assessments. So your topic and your theme was dot on. Actually, our faculty have been asking how to be sure about fair and transparent assessments in an alternate environment, in an online environment. And I think your talk was mostly around that. What was more important for the resources, you have collected remarkable resources, and we'll be sharing these all with the faculty. We'll place them on our website. Thank you once again, Hoda. I look to the Center of Learning and Teaching as a model. Ji?
Ma'am, there is one more question. It is by Miss Ruth. That can you share some ideas for foreign languages case, which might be slightly different from English?
Well, I won't claim to be an expert on foreign languages.
Resources for yeah.
I won't claim to be an expert for foreign languages. But I think that the general rule of are you referring to assessments in general or?
Ruth, this is one of our South Korean faculty, and she's right now in South Korea. So that's where she is. Ruth, could you please respond to her question?
Yes, first of all, sorry for asking this question at almost the end of this session, but thank you so much for your very informative session. Yeah, so I will put it like this way because you already replied to the Rubab and to have her some kind of a connection with the faculty for English department in your university. So if you have any connections with any other foreign department and the faculty or the center, maybe it will be helpful for me as well if you can connect me and with them. I think maybe I can ask them for further more detailed questions.
Okay. What do you teach?
Yeah, I'm teaching the Korean, but actually we have 4 foreign language courses here in FC College: German, French, and Korean, Chinese. So most of all, and we are trying to use whatever the devices or the channel that we can use, like a WhatsApp, and you all in the faculties mentioned here, the WhatsApp, Google, Zoom, and the webinars even. And also we are frequently contacting our students and whether they are doing fine or not, and also Q&A sessions, and also they are taking their photos of their assignments and recording, and they're doing their presentation. And those are still going on, but I'm just wondering if there is any exemplary cases in your where your university is doing, and we just want to learn some.
I'm not aware honestly of anyone, but if something does cross my path, I'll definitely tell Roxana.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I would sort of draw your attention to one additional new resource on our website for end of semester that you will find useful is our rubric resource bank.
Okay.
It's on our website, Roxana. You might want to also add that to your resources, because at the end of semester, if without a rubric, our students really struggle with things like end of term papers, and we've noticed, unfortunately, now that we've gone online is very unforgiving. What worked before doesn't work anymore. So if you gave your student a paper before without a rubric, you can't get away with it now anymore online. So faculty have been asking for rubrics, so we put together a resource for rubrics. So you'll find those then on our website, so please do share them.
Okay.
Please do share them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. As we put on your video on the website, the resources will be all there in the document. Thank you so much once again, Hoda. Lots of thanks coming in, and truly indebted to you for your time. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Gee, we still have 46 people with us. Most of them stayed on. Ataur Rahman ko dekh rahi hu, Sadia. Good to hear from you, Ruth. Sylvia is there, Amara, Seemal, Khatija, Romel, John. I think everybody can see everybody, right? So I don't need to go through the names, but it's a delight to see you all, and thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.